lectures, and I share my screen. Keep in mind that this is like an infinite loop issue with Google. I don't know why they don't solve it. I guess they can't solve it. But keep in mind that if I'm over there, the audio isn't going to be as clear. So like use these for references. Don't use these to miss class and look at the lecture because the audio is not going to be as clear. I'm going to write stuff on the board and you're not going to see what's going on. So you always should attend class and use these for backtracking what I did in the demo. That would be a great tool to have. And I created the Google Groups community so you guys can see me midway during class and I can confirm your account. I'll post the lectures there. And that's about it, I think. Okay, so let's get started. So this class we're going to be talking about, it's not like a huge topic. We're going to be talking about basically how you can create alerts and action sheets. So we went over this about 2 different lectures describing the UI of what an alert is and what an action sheet is. And this whole lecture is dedicated to basically how do you actually create them in iOS. So I think the best way to start off would be to just show you a demo on how I would create them. So let's get started on that. These are all the views in my screen, and they all have constraints. So I'm going to try to figure that out. Let's see here. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call this alerts. And then I'm going to put it into my iOS. Usually, so this is just me. I usually have a folder called Playground. And this is where I put a bunch of the things I like to learn and like sample projects. So if you guys want to do that, you can follow that convention. All right, so I'm going to make the font sizes big for you guys to see. Cool. So I'm going to go to my storyboard. I don't like designing in this rectangle. I want to design usually in an iPhone 6 dimension. So I'm going to select the view controller, go to Attributes Inspector, and then select the size to be 4.7 inch. All right. So I'm going to have a button here. I'm going to call this Display Alert View the Old Way. And then I'm going to have another button, just Command C to copy, Command V to paste, so you can copy and duplicate UI elements. It's a really nice shortcut when you have buttons that are, or buttons that, or labels that have the same design. You don't want to redo the entire, like all the font sizes, all the styles, so you can just copy and paste elements. I'm going to display action sheet. The old way. All right, cool. So now I have my view controller in storyboard. I need to make an IB action. So this is the part where I link the code and storyboard because I want some piece of functionality to run when the user taps on either of these buttons. So I'm going to open up Assistant Editor that brings me 2 different views. I don't have my code on the right-hand side. So one thing I can do is I can drag my viewcontroller.m to the top here, to the breadcrumbs area. And when I drop it, it shows me this file. So I do not need did receive memory warning. Let's figure out how to get rid of this template. Please let me know. So I always delete did receive memory warning. And I actually don't need view did load as well. So I'm going to delete that because I want the cleanest interface possible. So I'm actually going to delete this too. So it's just an implementation file right now. Cool. So I'm going to make this an action by control dragging. And the name of the action is, I want to make this very verbose. Display alert view the old way did tap. The data type is basically the object that invoked the action. So this is a UI button that invoked the action, and I'm going to hit connect. Great. Okay, so let's see here. Let me make sure. All right, so Display alert view the old. See that might be Xcode giving me some issues. Let me try this. So what I can do is, if the connection isn't working, I can actually write out the IB action and then connect it that way. So I'm gonna write out IB action, name of the method, followed by UI button, sender. Let's see if that works. Sometimes like Xcode doesn't play well. What I can do is I can restart Xcode generally. Sometimes I restart Xcode, but another way is that you can actually write out the name of the method, and you can connect to your interface builder elements that way. All right, so I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna create another IB action. I'm gonna call it display action sheet the old way did cap. The data type that's going to be passed back is a UI button. I'm going to call it the sender, and that's my method. And then now I need to create a connection between what I have in code and the button. So let's actually log this to make sure we actually have this working. So I'm going to nslog this. So one thing I can do, one thing I've been doing traditionally was just print out the name of the method as a string. But one thing you can do is, let's see here. You can use this format specifier %s to indicate a C style string. And then you can insert this, this special variable called __ function. What this does is this returns to you a C string that you insert here, and it's gonna basically take the name of the function in which it resides in, and it's gonna print the name of the function. So these two are equivalent in the sense that they're printing the name of the function, but this one is more reusable because I can just plug this in anywhere I want. So that's like a pro tip. Before I go any further, I want to see this works. So I'm going to run the app on an iPhone 6. Let's see here. I think Xcode is giving me an issue. So I'm just going to restart Xcode. And hopefully everything will work out. So quit Xcode. Let's see. So one thing you can do with the simulator is that you can click reset content and settings, and what this does is it completely wipes out any like caches, any apps that you run here. So this is a really good way to reset the simulator to its original state. So I use this a lot, actually. So let me command run again. Hopefully it'll work. All right, so it's a good sign. Let me tap on this. All right. This is my debug panel. This should show my console. If it's not showing the console, that's because, remember, in the debug panel, there's two panels. One that shows you the variables when you're in a debugging mode. The other shows you the actual console. So right now, it's just showing me the panel with the variables that I use during when I have breakpoints and all of that. So right now, the debug panel is right here. So if you click on the bottom right, so I'm showing the debug panel. Cool. So it looks like it's working correctly. And notice how right here, this function, it shows you the class in which the method is executed and also the name of the function. So it does a little bit more than just showing the name of the function. So it's a pretty cool global variable to be using. It's pretty sweet. You always want to keep this in mind when you're building your applications. You don't want to go from step 1 to step 10 and then hit the run button for the first time, and then backtrack on what went wrong if something went wrong. You always want to make incremental steps, do a little bit of a testing, and then keep moving forward that way. Otherwise, you're going to run into a lot of headaches, because if you wrote like 200 lines of code, something went wrong, it's going to be really hard to backtrack that way. Cool. So I have my IB actions connected. So let's talk about the alert view. So to create a alert view the old way, basically we have this class called the Uialertview. Everything okay back there? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so we have a class called Uialertview, and notice how there's this Uialertview. Notice how there's little little red dash, and if you read the description in that tooltip, it says Uialertview is deprecated in iOS 8, which means that ever since iOS 8 came out, it's no longer supported by the Apple community. But it doesn't mean that you can't use it. It just means that they're not supported anymore. It's like a warning. It's not a mandatory that you don't use it. And we want to expose this to you guys because iOS 8 is still kind of recent. You're still going to see a lot of code that uses this class. So I just want you to know what a Uialertview is. So I'm going to create a Uialertview object, Uialertview. And remember when we were creating strings, how like you create a string using NSString, alloc, init. You can do like init with, let's see here. So you can do alloc init, or you can do NSString string with, right? So usually when you create classes in Objective-C, let's see, you can either do the two-step process where you call alloc to allocate memory in the RAM and init to initialize values for your object, or you can call this one class method that does both underneath the hood. Back in the day when memory management is important, this matters, but right now it doesn't matter because iOS has garbage collection. So you really are better off using this class method because it's just shorter. Both of them create a string for you. One of them uses like two-step instantiation. And then right here, this is a one-step instantiation, object instantiation. So underneath the hood, string with format is basically calling alloc and init for you. So the reason why I pointed that out is because Uialertview has a class method called alert view. Let's see here. Alert. So let me quickly jump to the sample project that I written. Let's see here. Or maybe it's alloc. Let's see here. Alloc init. Okay, so for now we're going to use the two-step initialization process. So Uialertview is the name of the class. Alloc allocates memory, and then it takes a custom initializer, or basically a custom constructor. I'm going to make this one screen so you guys can see it a little bit better. Okay. So so notice it's extremely verbose. Basically, you're creating this is a custom constructor, and it takes a lot of arguments. And this is the way Objective-C is. It takes a lot of arguments for creating objects. But if you read from left to right, it's sort of readable. It's meant to be verbose and readable like English. So I'm initializing an alert view with a given title. So remember that every alert view can have a mandatory title and an optional subtitle. So I'm just going to call, this takes a string. So I'm going to say this is my like hold up title. For the message, I'm going to say, please rate my app. Delegates, we are not going to use right now. And cancel button title, basically every alert needs to have at least one button. And this is known as the cancel button. So we're going to give it the name. You can give it whatever you want. I'm going to call it cancel. And other button titles takes basically a variable number of NS strings. So you can have one to be. So an alert view can host multiple buttons, but I'm just gonna have one button here. I'm gonna call this, let's call this other. And because it hosts a variable number of parameters, Objective-C needs to know when this variable, when you're gonna stop passing parameters, because this isn't an array. If it was an array, then you know when the array stops, you know how big the array is, but this is not an array. You're passing in a variable number of strings. So we terminate this variable number of parameters with nil. So this ends with a nil. So that's how that works. But right now I'm just gonna pass it 1. So let's see what happens if I run my app. So I created the alert view right here. And if I press display alert view the old way, I see the debug panel popped up. So I know something is hitting it. And I know I created the alert view, but nothing is being shown. That's because we created this object in memory. And we didn't tell it to display itself. This object is created in memory. And to display itself, we use alert view, and we use the action, the method show. When we call the show method, it takes the object that we created in memory and displays it in the view hierarchy. So notice how this is the title, hold up is the title, please rate my app, it's right there. The cancel button is called cancel, the other button is called other. Let me actually test this out because I haven't actually done this. Some more buttons. Let's see what happens if I put that. Kind of curious. Okay, so it does that. So you can add as many buttons as you want, 1 or more buttons. And notice how the cancel is always going to be at the bottom. So that's an interesting attribute of alert views. But if I press on any one of this, it would dismiss the alert view. Cool. Because of how verbose Objective-C is with creating these constructors, there's actually a convention for how you should organize your code to make it a little bit more readable. Basically, after every parameter, you hit the enter bar. And notice how the warning kind of messed it up. But if I hit the enter bar, notice how the semicolons are all aligned. And this is designed by with intention. Now this one would be aligned too if the alert wasn't messing up my style. But constructors are actually meant to be very verbose. So there's actually a lot of parameters you pass to methods and to constructors. And to resolve the fact that it's very verbose, this is a style that's adopted by Objective-C. You hit enter and all the semicolons align like this. So you can read, okay, I'm creating an alert view with a message that's right here, delegate, no delegate, the cancel button is called this, and the other buttons are called this. So this is a little bit, this is more readable than something like this, right? So when you have really long method name, make sure you hit enter, and then they would automatically align it like that for you. Cool, so.
Do you not line up in it with title with that?
It would line up, except let's see here. Yeah, it would line up, but that warning. So you notice how it was lined up, and then the warning messed it up. Yeah, so that's an oversight for Apple. I would file a bug report, but I probably won't. But they might even want to keep it because they don't want you to use alert view because it's deprecated. But I just want you guys to know, like, if you guys do see this code, don't like freak out. This is how you create an alert view all the way from the beginning of iOS till iOS 8. Cool. So that's displaying the alert view the old way. Let's talk about action sheet the old way. So the action sheet is also a view. So I'm gonna create an object called the UI action sheet, which is also deprecated because you see that red line. So I'm gonna call this an action sheet. And to create an object, I use the name of the class UI action sheet. And let's see if I can alloc and init. Yeah, so it follows the same pattern. Init with title, let's call it, I'll give it the same. Please rate my app. Yeah.
Quick question. The nil at the end of other button titles. Why do you have that?
So what happens is that other button titles takes people call it like var args, like a variable number of arguments. So you can pass it as many strings as you want. It's dynamic, but it doesn't take an array. And because it doesn't take an array, it doesn't know when your argument stops. That's Objective-C when they go to language. That's how they design it. And you basically need to tell Objective-C, okay, I'm going to keep adding strings, and this is where you stop. This is where it stops. But if it takes an array, then you really don't need nil. You can just pass it an array.
So
but
you didn't have a nil there, so now it's here.
check it out. Let's see. So missing sentinel, the sentinel value. We can even go as far as running it to see what happens. Yeah, so it's like really strange behavior. You see, for some reason it like I don't know what's happening right now. So you should probably add the nil, or else this would happen. What it's probably doing is that it has. Yeah, I don't want to start with what's happening. Just add. Yeah, you don't want a strange behavior. It's probably like trying to find other stuff in memory that can be used as buttons, and it found please rate my app as a string, and it used that. It found cancel, it used that, and it found cancel again. Like a sentinel value basically tells the program to stop looking for extra strings. Cool. I'm just gonna do some more buttons here. All right, so back to our action sheet. So a quick way for you to comment and uncomment your code is to command /. So I do that a lot with multiple lines. If you use the command / to comment your code, command / to uncomment your code. All right, so let's see here. So I'm creating the action sheet, and it's a little bit messy right now. So I'm gonna, after every parameter, I'm gonna hit the enter button to hopefully clean it up a little bit more. And that's a little bit more readable, right? So so I'm going to initialize this action sheet with a given title. We don't have to worry about delegates right now, so nil. We're going to have a lecture on delegates. Delegation is probably one of the most important design patterns in iOS. Like they really took that design pattern when developing iOS. But we don't have to worry about that right now. Cancel button, I'll call it cancel. Destructive button title. This is optional, but let's just see what happens if we put something destructive. Other button titles, let's stick with what we had in the top, some more buttons. So let's see what happens if we run this app. So it's clearly running the IB action. So this is actually a good way for you guys to test your IB actions. So I know some of you guys, when you guys had the connection or you thought you had the connection, but then you hit the button, but nothing's working. My first question to you would be, is the function even running? So a quick way for you to test that is to have a log and to actually hit the button and see if anything's on the log. You'd be surprised how many times you thought you had a connection or you thought it would run a function, but it didn't. So this is a quick way to see that, okay, it's clearly running this method right here, but who can take a guess on why the action sheet is not showing? What was that? I didn't call show. So let's see here. Action sheet, show. So action sheet is a little bit different. It needs to have show, but it needs to know which view that to be presented on. So we know that every view controller has a property called view, which represents the main view. So if I go over storyboard, I look at my view controller. Every let's see here. Every view controller has a main view right here, and that's representative of the entire screen. So Unifies right, I need to comment the call show. It's a little bit different than alert view. It needs the main parent view on where it should be placed into. So let's give that a shot. Okay, display action sheet the old way. Cool, so that's my action sheet. Notice how the cancel button is different than the destructive button, because the destructive button is not anchor at the bottom, and the destructive button is red. So this is when you want to like indicate a destructive action, like deleting a post, deleting an email, deleting your calendar event or something like that. So again, just like with the alert view, the action sheet always anchors the cancel button at the very bottom. So let's see here. So that's the title. There's no description, at least in this initializer. It doesn't provide me with a place to put my description, but that is that in action. So I can press any of these buttons, and that is my action sheet, and this is my alert view. Cool, so that is how you do it up to iOS 8.3. Any questions on action sheets and alert views? All right, so let's move on to the newer way of doing things. And I am going to create 2 more buttons. Now, these buttons I don't want to copy and paste. Why do you guys think I don't want to copy and paste these buttons? Exactly. So if I look at this button and I look at the connection, it's actually connected to an IB action. So if I copy and paste that button, I'm actually copy and pasting everything about it, including the connections it has. So I actually like accidentally done this in the past, and I would click on one button and it would fire a function that I wouldn't expect. And that's because by copy and pasting, you also copy and paste the connection. Now you can copy and paste if you want, because sometimes we want to preserve the style. Like, you know, we don't want to change all the font size and the background color. We want the same thing. But if you do copy and paste, make sure you just clean out the outlets. Make sure you just click the X to delete the connection. All right, so I'm gonna search for a button in my utilities panel. I'm gonna call displays alert view. All right, I'll put the new way. All right, the new way. Now I can copy and paste this one. Display action sheets. New way. All right, so then I'm just gonna do some housekeeping and just make the actions connect. So I'm gonna give this a shot. Display action, alert view the new way. The data type is a UI button. Right, yeah. So notice how I did exactly the same thing, but Xcode worked this time. So sometimes you just have to restart Xcode because at the end of the day, Xcode is a program. Programs have bugs. So restarting it resets the internal state machine of the IDE and makes it work again. So cool. So I'm gonna make another IB action here. This time I'm gonna call display action sheet the new way, and it's of type UI button. All right, so I'm gonna trust. I'm not gonna rerun this. I'm gonna trust that these are connected the correct way, and always make sure that your connections are made correctly. So one thing you can do is if you hover over this bubble, it tells you what view it's associated with. So some students thought they had the connection set, but this bubble was empty. When they hover over it, there was no views being highlighted, and that shows you that the connection was not made. Cool. So in iOS, ever since iOS 8 or 8 or 9, we don't use these 2 classes as separate things anymore. We actually merge action sheet and alert view into one class. and that class is called the Uialertview control. Let's see here, controller. Alert view controller. Let's see here. UI alert controller. Okay. I always get a little nervous when auto completion doesn't work. Doing something wrong. But so the UI alert controller is a completely new class that was introduced, and the intention was to merge the action sheet and an alert view into one single interface. So the way you create alert controller is the same way, UI alert controller. And then there's a class method called alert controller with title. So notice how it's a little bit different. How in my action sheet, I did alloc and init, but in my alert controller, I just did a class method that creates an object, alert controller with title. So I am going to, let's see here. All right, cool. So I'm going to align them. So this alert controller takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the title that I need to present it. So I'm going to call this, let me give it like the same titles just to be consistent. Please rate my app. The message is basically the description I want to give to my alert view or my action sheet. Give it 5 stars or else. So the preferred style, this is the part where we determine whether or not we want this alert controller to be displayed as an action sheet or a alert view. So this is the part where we determine which one is it. UI alert controller style. So this is an enum, and there's only 2 possibilities. Either it's an alert view or an action sheet. So I'm gonna type the exact name of this that's given to me. UI alert controller style. So UI alert controller style. And notice as I'm typing, it tells me that this type is an enum, and there's only 2 possibilities. Either it's an alert or an action sheet. And by doing this, if they introduce some new UI, they can make it extensible. They can add new enums and ways of displaying alert to users. So let's make this alert style. I can actually, let's see, I can command click on this and look at the source, and notice how alert control style is the enum, and there's only 2 different 2 possibilities. Alert controller style and UI alert controller style action sheet, which equals to the number 0, and UI alert controller style alert, which is the number 1. So anytime you want to go deeper into the source code, you can hold command and click on the name of the class. And sometimes when you get more experience as a developer, you don't need to like waste time going to the web and looking at the documentation. Sometimes you can tell from the public interface of the class what properties you can access and what methods you can call. So an add action is a method I can call. These are the properties I can access, the title and the message. And also another pro tip for you guys is a quick way for you to look at documentation without going to the Apple website is to hold Option and click on the name of the class. This gives you a nice little description, a nice little like example on how to create it when it's available. So that's a nice little way for you to know a little bit more about a method or about a class or about a data type. So one quick note is that I just noticed today that Apple changed their documentation, which is kind of sad for me. They changed the way they designed this. I trust that they did some study on this, but I actually really like the accordion style that they had before. So this is a little sad. The content itself is still the same, but if you go over here, so this is written in Swift. We don't want to see Swift right here, so we click Objective-C, and we go down. This is more Objective-C. So notice how methods begin with a dash, properties don't have the dash. So that's when you can tell something is a method or something's a property. It's still, yeah, this is weird because it doesn't have the accordion. I like the accordion style. But it's still, even though they changed the UI, it's still probably the best documentation resource much better than Android. But yeah, that's I literally found out about that today. But I digress. Let's see here. So I created my alert controller, and basically with the UI alert controller, every button is of type UI alert action. So every button has its own class. So the way we do it is we create a UI alert action, I think. Sorry, UI alert action. And let's call this an OK. Let's call this a OK action. And to create an object, we follow the same pattern we've been using. The name of the class, UI alert action, alloc init. Or we can do alloc init, or we can do alert action with title. So this is the name of the action. So I'm going to call this OK. This is the style that we want to give it. Again, it's an enum, which means that there's a fixed amount of possibilities on what you want the style to be. So I'm going to type this out, UI alert action style. And as you can see, this enum has 3 possibilities. Either it's the default styling, it's the cancel styling, or it's the destructive styling. The default styling means that it's these 3 are the default styling. The destructive styling is right here. It's marked in red. And the cancel styling is a special button that is anchored to the bottom. So there's 3 types of styles you can use. I'm going to use the default styling. So I'm going to hit enter for handler. And so this is, so let me hit enter right here, enter right there. So how many of you guys heard about like closures or lambdas? How many of you guys know about closures, lambdas, blocks? So basically this is a block in Objective-C. And what's happening is the handler takes an input, and that input is essentially a function. So when the user taps on OK, this is the function that would be executed, that would be run. And we're going to have a lecture on blocks in Objective-C, but think of blocks as you're basically passing a function as an argument. We're no longer passing data, like we're no longer passing a string here, but we're passing a function that would run when the user presses the OK button. So this is a block, and in this block I can write code with a function. So I'm gonna write nslog the OK button is pressed. Yes, JD.
Is like the motivation for that format, is it somehow more efficient?
So they came up with this format because this function is extremely specific. It doesn't make sense to put this function in your view controller because you're only using it. Okay, so visually, not only can you see the alert action being created, but you can also see what's going to happen if you click on that action. Because if you have 1,000 lines of view controller, it's very hard to know, like, okay, clicking OK, what function actually gets run. But having this inline style, that's usually the design pattern, the design decision behind blocks and closures. You want to have functionalities in line because it makes the most sense in here. So it's not like more performant, it's just a better coding design decision. So yeah. So blocks, for those of you guys who aren't introduced to blocks, they kind of are difficult to wrap your head around at first. But basically, again, this is just a function that would run when the user presses the OK button. So I created the alert controller, and I created the OK action. But I haven't associated them with each other. They don't know about each other. So what I need to do is, for my alert controller, I need to call a method called add action, and I pass it the OK action. So this inserts the action into the alert controller. And with something like this, this allows me to be reusable because I can have an action that can be present in different alerts. It can be present in different alert views or action sheets. So this allows me to have an action that's more reusable that I can plug into other view controllers, alert controllers if I wanted to. So I did all that hard work. I'm gonna run it. See what happens. All right, display alert view the new way. Oh, sorry, let's see here. Oh, I think I actually made this. Let's see if I made the names correct. Let's see really quick. I think I might have misnamed. So display alert view the new way. Okay, that's right. Let's see here. All right, cool. Yeah, everything's right. Cool. So if I click on this, nothing is showing again. Any guesses on why nothing is showing? The show function thing, yes. So we've created this object in memory, and it only exists in memory. We didn't tell it to be presented in the view. So the difference here is that, so for those of you guys how many of you guys know the MVC design pattern model view controller? Yes. Okay, cool. So one of the decisions why we're gonna go over MVC in next week, I think. But for those of you guys who understand MVC, another reason why they decided to make it an alert controller is because views shouldn't have functionalities attached to them. It should be the responsibility of the controller. So notice how if you go to Uialertview and if you click on it, and if you look at this, it's actually a subclass of Uialertview. So alert view is just a view, a subclass of a view. But if you go to a Uialert controller and you click on it, you can see that it's a subclass of a Uialertview controller. So it makes more sense in the MVC design pattern to have functionalities that are attached to a controller and not a view. A view shouldn't have functionality. A view should be just something that looks extremely pretty and it just displays the data. And that's all it should do. So when designing a new class, the Apple engineers decided that, like, these are actual functions that are being run. It makes sense for a controller to have them, not for a view to have them. So the reason I said that is because this is a controller, not a view. And the way you present a controller in the screen is very different than how you present a view. So to present a controller, you get access to whatever the current object is, and then you call the method present view controller. So this is how you present another controller. So your view controller is one screen, this alert controller is another screen, and this is how you present different screens. So we're going to be talking about how you build an app with multiple screens, and every screen is a view controller, and how you transition between different view controllers is through this key method present view controller. So we are going to pass it an object that is of type UI view controller. So alert controller fits that description because, let's see, if I hover and click over it, okay, it doesn't say it right there, but I already showed you guys UI alert controller is a subclass of UI view controller. So that's why this works. So I'm gonna pass alert controller. Sure, I'll have animation. So animated, yes or no, it takes a Boolean. Completion is also a block. So completion is a block of function that runs after it's been presented. Sometimes you want to present another screen and then run some sort of functionality after it's been fully presented. But if you don't care about the completion, we can just put nil right there. So let's Command R and run this, and let's see what happens. Display alert view new way. Cool. So I know it's kind of anticlimactic because it's the same thing, sort of. But we're using, like, we as engineers, we see beyond this, right? We know that we're using the newer convention. We're using the not deprecated way of showing this alert view. And it comes with it a lot of design patterns that makes it better, like the use of blocks, the use of controllers, the idea that you can combine alert view and also action sheet into one interface. So what I'm going to do is You should never do this, but I'm going to copy and paste. And if I want to make this into an action sheet, all I have to do is change the style. So I'm going to change this to UI alert controller style action sheet. If I run this, I hit this button, now it's an action sheet. And this action sheet also has a description. So just like that, I changed not even one line of code. I just changed one value. And it's able to be presented in 2 different ways. Cool. So anyone have any questions about alert controllers? Yeah.
Yeah. So the difference between the old way and the new way is it just like for intuition purposes, in terms of like understanding? Because you said the reason why they did it the new way is they want to present it through the controller, not the user.
So there's a few reasons why they did it a new way. It's because when you think about design decisions like functionality, like for something like this, for this block of code to run, it should belong to a view controller, not to a view. So design patterns really matter when it comes to like programming like good solid applications. So they did that because they want to use the controller for handling functionalities and not a general view. Second is that they want a singular interface for handling pop-ups. So right here on the top, you have 2 different classes you need to know. You need to know UI action sheet, UI alert view. But with this, you have a single interface. You only need to know about UI controller, alert controller. And because it's a single interface, if iOS 12 comes out and they decide to make a new way to present something, all you really have to do is change this enum. So UI alert controller style. Right now, there's only 2 possibilities. You can display a pop-up. Maybe there's like 2 more possibilities 5 years down the line. And this makes it a lot more extensible. You don't have to know like 2 more classes. You just need to know that one value that you need to change. So a lot of good reasons. And Apple, and I think this is a better design decision overall. So is that a little bit? Yeah. Alert. Yes. Sabrina, do you have a question?
Yeah, just so we can always use the new way.
You should always use the new way.
Okay.
Yeah. But you should be aware. At least do one exercise where you created the old way, because it's still very prevalent in a lot of code. And you're gonna see examples where they use this. So just be aware of that. Any other questions? So a lot of material, I guess. So like you have UI alert view, that's new. UI action sheet, that's new. This kind of crazy way that Objective-C does initialization, they take a bunch of parameters and then they align the semicolons to make it more readable. UI alert controller being the 3rd class. So a good amount of code here. So let me quickly go through the slides. Like the slides are just what I did for the demo. So I thought if I do a demo first, you guys would better understand it. So basically, we went over the UI alert controller that replaces the UI alert view and action sheet, and it unifies the system to present a pop-up. Let's see here. So UI alert controller is a subclass of UI view controller. So when we learn more about what UI controllers are capable of, you'll understand that a view is very different than a controller. It can do they can do very different things. The MVC model clearly states that model view controller are completely separate domains. Let's see here. So let's see here. So UI alert control, I already showed you. It could be initialized with a title, with a message. You can add alert or actions to it. Let's see here. So in the old way you do it, you have a variable number of arguments that specifies all the buttons that should be there. But this is different. The new way, you have a special class for handling an action. And that class not only contains the name of the button, but also the function that should run when that button is tapped. Let's see here. So for those of you guys who are a little bit more advanced, like the old way uses the delegation design pattern the new way favors like blocks instead. So UI alert controller is not just like we made it a little bit better. It's like, no, we like completely scratched the design of it. We made it into a singular interface that you can use. And this is like show you guys more of what an alert looks like, an alert view. And then this slide shows you the old way of doing it. Deprecated meaning not supported, but you can still use it since iOS 8. This is the new way. More text, I think, but much better in terms of the design. And as you're using it more, I hope you'll start to appreciate a little bit more. So right here, this code we actually added 2 different actions. One of them is a cancel action, and it has a cancel style. So that doesn't really matter here, but remember for an action sheet, a cancel button is always anchored to the bottom. So having a cancel style means that if you're displaying an action sheet, it would always be put to the bottom. And then right here, we're adding the 2 actions to the alert controller, and right here, we're presenting the alert controller to the screen.
So that the image is not actually what the code is suggesting because it's not a cancel style, right?
So it has the UI alert style. So the alert style looks like this. The action sheet style is the part. So this is what the code is doing.
So were you to add that to an action
Sheet
then in the cancel button would be
anchored to the bottom. Yeah. Cool. So there's only 3 styles for action buttons. There's a cancel style, there's a default style, and the third one is the destructive style, which basically puts a red color on it. That's all it does. It doesn't actually destroy anything. It's just red color. You need to write the code that actually destroys something, that deletes something in here. Cool. So that is the alert view, the new one, and this is what the action sheet looks like. So this is when it's anchored to the bottom. So those are the 3 styles: the destructive style, the default style, and the cancel style. This was the old way that it's done that I've shown you, using the UI action sheet class, which is a subclass of Uialertview. And then basically, the way you handle buttons when they're pressed is that you need to attach the action. You need to set up a delegation, and this method needs to be on the view controller, and it can get a little bit messy. But I'm not going to go there because this is already deprecated. So this is what it'll show if I switch that bolded value to an action sheet. So the cancel button will be anchored to the bottom. So that's one word that I need to change to completely change how the interface is like. So that's super cool. Cool. So I added, so there's 3 buttons here, one with the cancel style, one for the destructive style, and one for the default style. Let's see here. So one more thing that is interesting is that the code that we've written is going to work fine on an iPhone, but it might crash on an iPad. And let's see why really quick. So let's say I want to run this in an iPad Air. Let's see here. Okay, that's an iPad Air. So one thing that you notice immediately is that it doesn't look, it looks like that's not what I want, right? I want to actually build an iPad application, not like an iPhone 5 application that scales up to an iPad. So in order to change that, you want to go to alerts, which is your project file. You want to go to devices, and you want to go to universal. So remember the very first time when you create your app, I told you that anything that you did there can be changed. So I initially designed this for an iPhone, but I decided, hey, I want to build an iPhone and iPad compatible app. So I'm going to make it into universal. And I'm going to rerun the app. And if I look into my simulator, this looks more like a native iPad app. There's no like 2x, 1x, and no weird scaling. Cool. So if I click on Alert View, that works. If I click on the new way, it works. But what happens if I click on Action Sheet? Oh, it works. Okay, let's see here. So the new way doesn't work. Okay, so the new way, when I click on the Action Sheet, it doesn't work. And the reason for that is action sheets are supposed to be a popover. So remember how I said on an iPad there's a little tooltip, and it's supposed to be a popover. And basically this action sheet needs to know where to point to, where the anchor should be. So we basically need to tell this action sheet, this alert controller, where the anchor is. So the old way works, but don't stick to that. I would go away from. All right. So right here. So remember that this action is called when. Okay, that's not the one. When this button is pressed. So this action is called when this button is pressed. And sender is the object that invoked the action. So sender is actually this button. It's a reference to this button. So what we want to tell the alert controller is that I want you to show a popover, and I want you to anchor the popover based on where this button is. So the way we do that is, let's see here. Alert controller has a property called Popover Presentation Controller, and it's of type UI Popover Presentation Controller. I'm going to call it PPVC, or Popover Presentation View Controller for short. And we're going to make an if statement. If the Popover Presentation View Controller exists, so if this alert view is inside of a popover, then we're going to set it anchor to this view right here. So we are going to say Popover Presentation View Controller dot source view is equal to the button, which is the sender. The source rect to be equal to the button's bounds. And one more property is let's see here, preferred. Let's see, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Permitted. Let's see here. Permitted arrow directions. So this is basically telling you like what direction should the tooltip be limited to. And then let's see what this is, an enum. So it's a UI popover arrow direction. Any. So I'm telling it, okay, so if you're inside of a popover, if a popover exists, I want you to be anchored to the button, to the button's bounds. So bounds and frames are essentially the same thing. And I want you to have any tooltip that's convenient for you. So if I run this on an iPad Air, and I click on this display action sheet, notice how there's the tooltip is pointing up, and it's anchored based on the button. So action sheets in iPads are always going to be popover. They're not going to display from the bottom up. That's how action sheets work. So the reason why it threw an exception is because there's nothing anchoring this popover. So the UI popover presentation controller is another example of a container view controller. Visible, it contains the actual alert controller that has the buttons and the title and the description. So that's how you. So I'm actually curious what would happen if I type UI popover arrow direction right. See what happens. Cool. So even though it's kind of forcing it, I've limited the arrow to be facing right. So I limit it. So by changing that value, UI popover direction right, it actually gave me some error messages here, but it still followed my directions as I instructed. So maybe I want to do, instead of bottom, I want to do UI popover direction left. That might be a little bit better. And then I click on this, left. Okay, cool. So by default, it goes down, probably because it looked at the real estate that's available to it, and the bottom one has the most space. But I want this UI to be anchored to the left. So I changed this direction to be popover arrow direction left. And again, this is an enum. There's only a limited amount of values that you can use. Yeah, I'm not going to go over the documentation. Cool. So action sheets displayed on pop and on an iPad. Sorry. It uses a popover. So basically, it's anchored to some sort of view, and it doesn't take up the entire screen. And this is an example of what we just did. And cool. So that's the code.
So if you do popover arrow direction any, it'll just go in the direction that it has the most
Space, probably, yeah. So it uses some sort of heuristic. I'm guessing it's probably using space. Yeah. If you run your code, you might get this error. So so whenever I make my actions, I always use the data type of the class that's invoking the action. By default, we don't use UI button. By default, it's ID, and I never do this. I'm always very explicit about what's the object that's actually running this method. So if it's ID, that means that it can be any object. We don't know what object it is. So sender doesn't have a property called bounds, because bounds is a property that belongs to a UI view. Right now, the compiler thinks that sender is of type ID. It doesn't know that it's of type UI button. So right here, if I put UI button, then it knows that, okay, sender is a UI button. UI buttons have a property called bounds, and that works. So some of you guys that create an action, if your sender is of type ID, the compiler doesn't know what data type the sender is, because ID just means it can be anything. So always be explicit about what your sender is. And from that point forward, it knows that, okay, sender is a UI button, which is a subclass of UI view, and every UI view has a property called bounds. Cool. So again, if your sender is of type ID, ID just means it can be any data type. So not every data type has a bounds property. So option one is to do what I did. Have all your actions have an explicit data type for what the sender is, whether it's a button or a switch or a slider. Be very explicit about that. Option two is, let's see here. Option two is you create another local variable, but you typecast that to be the sender to be a UI button. So this is kind of like a roundabout way to do it. I'm not sure why you would use option two. Generally, I would just go with option one, where you explicitly tell the method that, okay, the sender is going to be a UI button, rather than the sender being type ID and then you typecast it back to a UI button. Cool. So these are the alert controller can also take in text fields. So you can use this for secure login, or if you want the user to type a little bit. So alert controllers are more than just a title and a message. They can also display text fields or multiple text fields. Cool. So this is just telling you that you can add text inputs to the alert views. And this is an example of how you would add it. So the code, alert controller has a method called add text field with configuration handler. So this is adding a text field. And basically, inside that block of code, you're modifying what the text properties of the text field, whether or not it should have a placeholder, it should have some funky background color or text color. Let's see here. And that's about it for alerts. So these are some resources you can use. NS Hipster is actually a pretty popular resource for iOS development, but always refer to the Apple developer documentation, because they're the final authority on anything that's Apple. So that's about it for alerts. Anyone have any questions on alerts, alert views, alert controllers? Yeah.
On the new implementation of the action sheet, I added a cancel button, and it didn't show up in the iPad version.
I can take a look at that. Yeah. Maybe that's like a design decision. Maybe like they just decided not to have a cancel button on iPad and tapping away from it, because it's a popover, right? It's a popover, so you can always tap away from it. Let's see here. So any other questions on? So what's cool about like these lectures is that you basically know like 98% of what you need to know about using alerts, like anywhere, like even at work. Like this is all you need to know, basically. Cool. So I think, how many of you guys are finished with Lab 2 or almost finished? Okay, cool. All right, so let's just stick with the, because I don't know whether or not Trina like extended it. I don't think she did because she didn't reply back. But let's just keep with the current schedule. We have the rest of class. If you guys want to finish your Lab 2 to work on it. I'll show you guys, for those of you guys who want to continue, because I don't want you guys to have this weird gap period where you don't practice iOS. So let me show you guys Lab 3 really quick. I'll post it on Blackboard. It's probably not due until probably like September 26th. So let me show you guys Lab 3 really quick. So that's a lot of stuff. You can read about it if you want to. But basically, you're building like a tip calculator. So you put in like how much the bill is, what percentage of tax you want to add, and whether or not your tip should include the tax. So if your tip includes the tax, you're basically adding whatever the original bill is plus the tax, and then you calculate the total tip with the original bill plus the tax. But if it doesn't, you're calculating the tip with just the original bill amount. And then this is how much you want to tip, how much you want to split between each person, and then I think this I'll double check, but I think clicking this would probably fill up the labels. This would be the action that fills up the label. So this is basically actions and outlets, but a little bit of logic involved. So you have to use your arithmetic operations. You have to be a little bit more thoughtful about how you store values. So it's a nice exercise. And then there's a clear all button that when you click, resets everything to its original state. Also, you want to make sure that when you focus on a text field, that the user can't enter ABC. A really easy way to validate user data is to restrict user data, what they can input. So right here, this is a number pad. So the user can't, unless you're in the simulator, you can't physically enter ABC like characters. So this is one way you can design it with 3 different views. You can also, let's see here. So the clear all button, you're gonna display a alert view. Sorry, an alert controller with an action sheet style that confirms whether or not you want to clear. And then another way you can design it is that you can also squish it into one if you wanted to, instead of like, so the first one has 3 separate sections, or you can put it into one big view. Totally up to you in terms of the design. Or right here, this is 2 different sections. So we give you a little bit of flexibility. Please use better colors in this. So I think this is a pretty nice exercise because there's some logic. There's a little bit of logic involved, and you have to find like small things like how do you convert a double into round up to be 2 decimal places or something like that. So this is the original exercise was purely outlets and actions, but now you're getting a little more involved with a little bit more logic behind your view controller. I'll post this. I haven't posted on Blackboard yet. I'll post everything on Blackboard. Again, like you guys can get a head start on this if you want to play around with it, but it's probably going to be due 26th, which is a week from next Monday. And in the meantime, for those of you guys that need help on Lab 2, we're here for the rest of the class to help you guys out. Any questions? If not, I'll see you guys next Monday.
Do we have to auto make up the background button?
You should, yeah.
Like,
It's basically 0.000, like all zero. Yeah.